I'm Hemant Mehta.
This is Jessica Blumke.
And you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. We're here today with Joe Jervis, the prolific blogger at JoeMyGod.com, quite possibly the most popular personal blog about LGBT issues in the world. He's been writing on his site for more than 10 years, a lifetime in the internet world. His site has received multiple awards from groups like GLAAD, CBS News, and The Village Voice, and he's one of the blogs I read on a regular basis. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so here's the question I just want to start out with. You post so much. You are on top of all the news in the LGBT world. How do you, I'm sure you've gotten this question before, how do you do it? Like, do you have a regular job? How are you on top of everything at all times?
I do have a jobby job, as I call it, but I'm home office in that job. And that job is also in the LGBT news world, and I am the national editor of the National Gay Pride magazine. That title, of course, only publishes once a year, which leaves me a lot of free time to do the blog. It takes us about 4 months to put the magazine together, so I'm pretty much free to do the blogging full time the rest of the year. And fortunately, the powers that be at Pride magazine are very supportive of the blog, and in fact, we partner synergistically on different projects. So it works out. It dovetails very nicely.
So you don't have to worry about any a conservative activist calling your boss and saying, you need to get rid of Joe. He writes about these things.
In a sick way, I kind of wish they would.
Just to hear what the boss would say.
He'd get a kick out of it, yeah. No, the publisher is very supportive, and he's a daily blog reader. And in fact, sends me news tips all the time.
So what was the evolution of your blog? Did it start as just a literal personal blog for yourself and then it grew from there? Or did you have designs to take over the world from the beginning?
Absolutely not. To be honest, my longtime readers know this. The blog got its start when I got kicked off of a gay dating site. Because instead of saying, I am this and I'm looking for that, I was writing sort of pithy, snarky, takedowns of the whole gay dating site phenomenon.
Snarky on the internet?
I know.
Finally, they had enough of me and wrote to me and they said, this is supposed to be about hooking up. And they not so gently suggested I start a blog, and I thought, I have some friends that are doing that. Let me see how that's done.
Are your friends still blogging?
Most of them are not. I fell into a large family of gay bloggers here in Manhattan, and most of them have abandoned their blogs with the advent of Facebook. That satisfies their need to vent a little bit more effectively than maintaining a blog, I think. But my blog in the first few years was basically all a place for my short stories and just ruminations on the life of a middle-aged gay man in Manhattan. And eventually, I ran out of fun stories to tell, and I started blogging about the news.
Is that how the evolution happened? Because when I go to your site, it is all news all the time, and it's not a lot of personal.
My longtime readers chide me and say, "We want stories. We want stories." And I'm like, every now and then, I'll throw them a bone and put up a new story, but not too often. I've really gotten completely immersed in the live news blogging. And it's sort of taken over my life, much to the concern of some of my friends and my social life.
Let me ask you about that, because as someone who does something similar, but I guess in a different niche, in a different way, I do know what you mean about people being concerned that this is like all you do all the time. But I wonder, how do you manage when you are going out with your friends at night? What happens when you do take vacations? Because I know if I'm ever not at my computer, I'm just constantly thinking, oh my God, what if something happens right now? I should be near a computer right now.
It's a sickness, it really is.
It's like having a child.
Go anywhere. I travel with a mobile hotspot. I can't tell you how much money I've blown on in-flight Wi-Fi. Just to make sure that it just seems like, if I go to a food emporium, by the time I come back, there's another state with gay marriage.
Right.
And I've got 100 emails going, Joe, where are you?
It's been 12 minutes. How have you not gotten to this yet?
Exactly. Unfortunately, I've trained my readers to expect me to have the news on everything within 30 seconds, which does not give me any slack.
Yeah, I used to wonder who the hell pays this much money for like hotel wireless, and now I'm like, oh my god, I have 4 hours. I need the internet. All right, I'm paying this. What do you want? I'll pay whatever you want. Like, it is a sickness.
Right.
It's scary.
And I travel with 2 laptops just in case one starts to mess up. It really does take over your entire life. I was in Provincetown for a week earlier this month. And those 2 hours on the ferry from Boston to Provincetown, I'm thinking, I have no internet.
What did you do? It's like you have to be...
It was a Saturday, so I knew nothing major was going to happen during those 2 hours.
It's like you have to be socially interactive for 2 hours. I don't know how to handle that anymore, is all I'm saying.
I had to actually talk to people the entire time. It was a nightmare.
How did you get into this format where it's just, for the most part, a lot of your posts are, here's a quotation said by someone, I don't know, from the religious right, a conservative. Here's a link so you could see it for yourself, that you're quoting them verbatim. And maybe there's some snark in the headline.
That.
Yeah, they hate it when you quote them verbatim. It makes them look bad.
An anti-Christian hate blogger because I have this terrible habit of quoting them verbatim, linking to their original site, and posting their own videos.
You're supposed to make them all look good all the time, so I don't know what you're doing.
I am just horribly vicious in the way that I keep repeating their words word for word.
How did you get into that?
That format does allow me to pump out a lot of information very quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did you get started with that format? Because you don't really offer much in the way of commentary for the most part, but there is snark in the headlines and just sometimes, this was said by Tony Perkins.
I let the commentary ride in the headlines and in the post labels.
Yeah.
But, if I dwell too much on analysis and commentary pertinent to every post, it just slows me down for the onslaught of stuff I've got waiting in my inbox.
Yeah.
But every now and then, several times a day, I will throw a couple of snarks in of my own.
So do you find it sounds like most of the fodder comes from just people say idiotic things and you can repeat them. Like, has it been that way since you started doing the news, or have people gotten dumber or crazier?
Well, believe it or not, I'm on the listservs for a lot of anti-gay groups. They don't really police who signs up for their press releases, So, it has evolved somewhat in that regard. But the biggest change in recent years, of course, has been Twitter, which, turns everybody into a reporter. Everything happens first on Twitter, and then 2 hours later you get the press release. I monitor.
So you can almost be ahead of the news.
Oh, you really are, and I monitor usually about 15 to 20 Twitter streams at once on various topics. For example, just today I've had a Twitter stream running for weeks on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals and the Virginia case, and that thing sat there silently for weeks, and then today it blew up. And suddenly we've got gay marriage in North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Virginia.
Which is good news for all of us.
Yeah.
So when you get your hands on a story, do you know what's going to blow up and what's just going to kind of pass over? Because I feel like when I was blogging more frequently for Friendly Atheist, I would write something like, this is going to be huge, it's going to blow up, I'm going to get big on Reddit, and it would just fall flat, and then just some random crap I would write.
I never really know with my readers what will pique their curiosity or cause a flame war. The example in that question that I always like to bring up is a couple years ago was a very slow news day, and not much was happening. And oh, here's a story: the U.S. Mint is putting out the first new penny in 100 years. That's slightly interesting. And I put up the picture. Hey, there's a new penny. Here's what it looks like. I came back a few hours later, and there were 900 comments. What the heck are people talking about the new penny? And it turned into this whole huge thing on how if we did away with the penny, it will be stepping on the throat of poor people because everything will go up 5%, and it just, you never know.
Yeah, I never know how commenters are going to take
how
anything.
a story's going, and that's an aspect of the new penny that hadn't even occurred to me. I just thought, oh, it's neat. There's a new penny. First time in my life.
Little did you know they're disparaging poor people. Yeah. How dare you?
Right.
Why you got to be so classist, Joe?
Me, all over.
Do you ever worry that, all these gay marriage cases, it's becoming legalized in these states so quickly that, right now we seem to be on the cusp of all these gay rights issues. Within a few years, maybe it'll be legal everywhere, hopefully. But a lot of these cases are going to start dwindling. Do you ever worry about that within a few years?
That I'm going to run out of things to write about?
Yes.
Well, yes and no. Yes, in that we are, as you say, on the cusp of achieving the full federal civil equality that our Canadian neighbors have enjoyed for 10 years. And what happened in Canada is that a lot of LGBT rights groups sort of, folded up shop. There will always be a need for watchdog groups. Just because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed 50 years ago doesn't mean we still don't need the NAACP. Mm-hmm. So even when full federal equality is achieved, and I'm very confident that will happen within the next few years, there'll still be a need for watchdog groups. But when there aren't daily court battles and lawsuits revolving LGBT civil rights, certainly I'll have a lot to write about, in this burgeoning industry called, sincerely held religious belief.
Well, they're very, very important, don't you know?
What? In fact, I often have said that if, in a perfect world, if there were absolutely no LGBT rights battles to be fought, my entire blog would turn towards secularism.
Yeah, because it's kind of the flip side of
Which
the
is sort of
coin.
in your ballpark. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I'll take you on.
Oh shit!
No, it's like it's the flip side of the penny, if you will, where we fight the same battles. The same people who oppose LGBT rights tend to oppose, civil rights in other ways, or they oppose secularism as in government and things like that. So
Absolutely.
we end up fighting the same battles.
It's the same bad guy for both issues, and what we're seeing, behind the scenes, what's going on through U.S.-based anti-gay groups is they are collaborating and consolidating their support overseas because that's where they see, their next battleground. They privately and some of them openly concede that their battle is lost in the U.S. But there's still ripe, bigoted soil to be tilled in Eastern Europe and in Africa and in Asia, and that's where they are, pointing their horns, if you will, right now. For example, the National Organization of Marriage is collaborating with multiple international anti-gay groups to create this global consortium of anti-gayism that, they can raise money on and pay their salaries on because no one's going to give them any money for the U.S. once everything's done here.
I don't understand why they care. Like, I kind of get the mindset of like, oh, I don't think gay people should get married in the U.S., so I'm going to plant my flag here. But if you've lost that and you're like, well, Eastern Europe still has gay people, like, let's go over there.
We can always go to Uganda.
Because,
right?
First of all...
you have to remember, that these groups, they need to maintain their donor base. And, Pat Robertson, I'm sure you well know, has made millions on these pleas on how it's helping children, in desolate areas of the world, where at the same time he's, raking in millions from gold mines and carrying the riches back on the very planes that were supposed to bring food shipments. That sort of thing is just one example, but all of these U.S.-based anti-gay groups, they want to stay in business. They want to keep their salaries paid, and they see the writing on the wall in what's happening here, and they're gearing up to stay in business by offshoring their talent, so to speak.
So who do you think is the biggest problem right now? I mean, we have this tradition in America, this conservative kind of mindset in a lot of places, that's preventing some of these civil rights stories from actually happening. We still don't have gay marriage in all the states. But is there like one person who epitomizes all of that? Because I know you quote individuals who say awful things all the time, but is there kind of a ringleader now, or is it just, a few random people?
I would say that the U.S. ringleader would be Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council. The more sinister figure globally, to my mind, is Brian Brown.
Of the National Organization of
Marriage. The
Marriage.
head of the National Organization for Marriage. He is the one that is joining into this organization called the World Congress of Families, which is actually a U.S. Illinois-based corporation, the World Congress of Families. And the World Congress of Families, with the help of Brian Brown, is behind some of the anti-gay legislation in Russia, in some of the former Soviet satellite states. They've got their hands in everything. Austin Ruse, who is the head of a group called CFAM, the Catholic something family. He's a Breitbart blogger. He actually appeared at CPAC a couple years ago to denounce the United Nations for opposing the gay death penalty.
Huh.
And these are the people. Basically, the United Nations put out a resolution in their typical United Nations language saying, we oppose extrajudicial meaning, not by trial, extrajudicial executions of people on the basis of race, sexual orientation, blah, 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 blah. And Austin Ruse went on a rant at CPAC and saying how, this is the United Nations trying to backdoor gay rights.
By not killing them. By not supporting
by not killing them.
Right.
And that's the sort of guy that Brian Brown is collaborating with the World Congress of Families, who actually were supposed to have their, I think, annual convention this year in Russia. And then, the whole Crimea thing kind of scared them off.
Let me ask you this.
And they didn't have it.
Let me ask you a question that I've had for a while, which is that, we see a lot of younger Christians that seem to be supporting gay rights more so than before. Even a lot of young Christians will say their pastors are totally wrong when it comes to that issue. And I wonder if you ever get emails from those Christians who say, just reading your stuff has turned them more progressive, even though they may still be Christian. Do you hear from, Christians?
I do hear from Christians, but I tend to hear from gay Christians who tell me, don't be so hard on all of Christianity. We're all not like that. There's the Dan Savage back group called NALT.
Yeah.
Not all like that. And I tend to get emails from NALT Christians, but mostly they write to me. They understand, my position on religion. I basically have none until they get involved in civil laws. And otherwise I couldn't care less. And so they'll write to me sometimes and say, by the way, here's actually a positive Christian story. And now they'll send me a link to a story about a pastor who's accepted his son, or a congregation that, rebelled when someone tried to fire their gay choir director. And I'm happy to pass along those sort of gay positive religious stories, as few as they tend to be these days. But no, I don't tend to hear from straight Christians, except sometimes they send me things in the mail.
Yeah.
Well, when the best story you can come up with is a guy didn't disown his son, I feel like the bar is really low.
Right. That is a pretty sad statement on its face. But if we're going to get anywhere, we have to recognize that there are people who are Christian and stay Christian and will always be anti-gay, and yet when they have in a daughter, or they officiated a gay wedding, that is an advance in a way.
Do you?
One of the most vocal anti-gay mayors in France during the entire Manif pour tout, daily riots in the streets, he just officiated at his own son's wedding a few days ago. And his statement was, I'm never doing this again, and I'm still against gay marriage, but he's my son, and so shut up.
Do you see this being an issue in the 2016 elections and even the 2014 midterm elections for Republicans? Do you think it's going to be where they have to be supportive, or at least not against gay rights?
I don't see it being an issue among mainstream and moderate Republicans. Speaker of the House John Boehner had nothing to say when President Obama signed the LGBT executive order this week. They asked him point blank, what did he think about it? He says something like, the president signs a lot of things. Meanwhile, anti-gay groups are going nuts, screaming their heads off. We will always have opposition from the Tea Party, far-right extremist element of the GOP. And unfortunately, there's, dozens of them already in Congress and dozens of them more in the wings for the midterms, although we have seen some positive signs that the Tea Party is not necessarily making any more headway, especially among moderate and centrist Republicans. But by the 2016 elections, it's going to be a non-issue. It's going to be dead. The Supreme Court will have ruled by next summer. We'll have nationwide national marriage equality, and that'll just be something, in the history books and not worth even, turning into a campaign slogan. At worst, or at best, I should say, I could see people campaigning, and he was against gay marriage. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
That's really the only tool it'll be used for, I think, by 2016.
So do you think, say by 2016, gay marriage is legal, all 50 states. So do you think the next step is going to go back and look at what is a sincerely held belief and who gets to say what? Do you think that's kind of the next battle people are going to have to fight?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So say if gay marriage is passed across the country, it usually still has that caveat of, with the exception of sincerely held beliefs. So do you think that's going to be the next battle of establishing what is or is not a sincerely held belief?
The next battle is definitely going to be in the realm of public accommodations. Currently, only 21 states by statewide fiat ban anti-gay discrimination in housing, employment, public services, etc. In 29 states, it's perfectly legal to fire someone for being gay, or refuse to hire them, or refuse to rent to them, or refuse to serve them in your restaurant. ENDA, which the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which has basically fallen apart. Even the national gay groups have stopped backing it, was going to address one aspect of that, and that was just employment. What we really need is an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and just doing what Idaho activists say their slogan is, add the 4 words. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people on the basis of religion, gender, race, national origin, etc. And all we need to add is 4 words: sexual orientation and gender identity. Boom. And we're covered under everything that Christians have been covered under for half a century. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a really big ask, though. I'm hearing that even some hardcore civil rights activists are very leery of broaching any amendment of the 1964 Civil Rights Act because of what people might try to put in, as well as adding the 4 words.
The writers on that amendment or something?
Right. They would insert a poison pill, something that weakened it, in other aspects. If we put this up to an amendment, what other amendments will the right try to insert? And I think that's probably a valid fear. And I don't, this whole aspect of the possibility of amending the Civil Rights Act, is really new, and there hasn't been a lot of chatter about it, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
Let me change gears for a second. What is your relationship with other LGBT bloggers, other figures in the LGBT community, civil rights pioneers? Are you friends with them? Do you talk to them? Who are your people, I guess?
I'd say I'm at least acquaintances with almost all of the big names, and I'm fairly good friends with a lot of them. A lot of them feed me tips. A lot of them cite my work. And everyone on our side of the screen is very generous about sharing credit and spinning ideas back and forth and crediting each other's sites. I've appeared on Michelangelo Signorelli's show on Sirius XM quite a number of times. I've been on some NPR/PBS radio shows around the country from people who actually read me and write sites of their own. And I guess most of the major bloggers that I talk to the most, or here in New York, that would probably be Andy Toll over at Toll Road. And another great New York-based site to check out, by the way, is the New Civil Rights Movement, which won the GLAAD Award this year, and that's David Badash's site. Really great stuff on there all the time. But yeah, we all get along pretty well. I'm close friends with Matt Foreman, who's the former head of the NGLTF, and he's now working for the Haas Foundation out in San Francisco. But yeah, there's no one here I can badmouth out loud. No one comes to mind at the moment anyway.
So what would you say are the biggest problems you face in the community?
That the gay community faces amongst ourselves?
What do you think is the most divisive, I guess, within the community?
Well, probably a lot like secular humanists or atheists. The LGBT community is not defined by any of the usual social boundaries that define almost all other causes and groups. We are of all nationalities, of all religions, of all races, and that often does not provide for, a very smooth ride sometimes. For example, on my site, I'm well known, for better or worse, that I don't moderate the comments. And sometimes racist gay people say terrible things, and transphobic gay people say terrible things. And I tell my readers, we need to own that we have these people among us. They are ours. We have to own them. And that to me is the saddest and probably biggest internal problem gay people have, and it's fairly intractable. It's always going to be with us. We're people from all over the world, a million languages, a million religions, every race, and human nature being what it is, there are gay racists and there are gay transphobes, and it's always going to be that way.
So in a sense, you're saying, you have this big tent, but within that tent, you're always going to have these assholes somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
And how do you deal with them? Do you embrace them, or do you toss them out?
The way I deal with them is I allow them to post freely on my site for two reasons. One, I think it's very instructive to my other readers, who may not even think that we have people like that among us. And secondly, I want these people to be able to see how other gay people treat them and react to them.
Is it weird?
I often get asked to go into a post and clean up the thread from some transphobic or racist gay person, and I'm like, no, I'll leave it in there. You deal with him. Mm-hmm. You show him why he's wrong. I just don't want to ban him from the site.
Has that worked? Because I know I've had the opposite happen where, I will just constantly get crap if any of that is in the thread. And on a personal note, I don't want it in there anyway.
Right.
But if they are, it's hard for me to say a racist because I can't imagine any justification for that one. Mm-hmm. But if someone said something awful, I may delete it. At the same time, it's kind of one of those, if they're talking about it and they say, I disagree and here's why, I'm more inclined to listen to it. But it's kind of those, if it doesn't look like spam, I'm more inclined to keep it. But I know that pisses a lot of people off.
But I think there's a difference between if I disagree with this or they're just trolling.
Right.
Because we get trolls once in a while.
If someone's just trolling just to, disrupt the thread,
right,
then I'll get rid of those people.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen too often. My readers know that there's only one word that's forbidden in my comment field, and they know that everything else is allowed except I don't allow any threats of violence or any wished threats of violence, like I hope you have a heart attack.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I don't like. My site, I don't know if you know this, but anti-gay sites like WorldNet Daily and Matt Barber have always threatened to call Eric Holder on me and have the FBI come over and arrest me because people in my comment fields were saying ridiculous things like we should burn churches.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously no blogger can be responsible for things that people say in their comment field, the anonymous nobodies. And my suspicion has always been that people saying some of these things aren't even necessarily gay. They're just, doing drive-by nonsense in order to grab a screenshot that they can hustle over to WorldNet Daily.
Right. Yeah, I get drive-by evangelists often. Mm-hmm. Not nearly as bad as the burn down the church folks, but yeah, it's frustrating. What keeps you motivated now? Obviously, there's a lot of good news coming in left and right, But what is it that makes you really excited to get up and share this news with everybody?
It may sound trite, but what really excites me is the passion that young LGBT people have for their lives. I look back, I'm 54 years old. I came out in the mid-'70s, and the life that these kids have laid before them right now is it's as if we're in a parallel universe. And just to watch them talk about their plans for family and career and support and love from their families and their coworkers, I still can't get over it. It's been going on for a decade. But that does motivate me quite greatly.
That's great. Joe, I think our time is good here, so thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
You may get back to your laptop now.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice meeting you, Jessica.
Nice meeting you, Joe. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois, and the music was written and performed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant, that's He-Man T. We appreciate your support. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke. We hope you'll join us next time.